So I'm so excited to have all of you here for Accessible Document Design. My name is Dr. Karen Crozer. I am a distance education specialist and an English associate professor at Mission College. And today we're going to do kind of a whirlwind tour of how you can create accessible documents and how you can retrofit the ones that you already have. So if you don't retain everything, that's okay. I'm trying to cram a lot into an hour and a half. But I will give you my presentation at the end so that you can review it later if you want to. And I'm also going to recommend a class from @1 that goes into more detail about this topic. So my name is Dr. Karen Crozer, like I just said, and I first want to really thank the team that's supporting me. So first of all, my DE team of Alabara, our DE coordinator, and also BOMDAD. And then I'd also like to thank the DSPS team here at LAMC, like Adrian Gonzalez, Adam Serta, the whole team. They've been really supportive, really helpful, really wonderful as I've tried to really master some of these ideas. So I'm grateful for their support. If you have any questions at all after this training, feel free to reach out to me at crozerkj@laccd.edu. This is part of a series. So some of you are familiar faces. You've been here for some of the other things that I've done. This is the third one. Next Tuesday will be the fourth one. Next Tuesday, we're going to do a deep dive into accessible video design, how you can make a better video, how you can caption a video, how you can find good video resources online that are accessible, and then how you can embed them into a Canvas page. So I know it's a very busy time of year, but if you happen to be free next Tuesday, I would love to see you as we finish out the series. I also would like to give credit to @1 Online Network of Educators. They have a class called Creating Accessible Course Content, and that's where a lot of this language is adapted or pulled from, and it is shared under a Creative Commons Attribution license and is possible through the California Community College Chancellor's Office funding. So want to make sure we give them credit. Also, there's only so much I can do in 90 minutes to kind of try to help you understand these complex ideas. It's a lot at once. So what I would recommend if you have time is that you take the 4-week class. So there is a 4-week class offered by @1 called Creating Accessible Course Content. It's $85, but if you are faculty, reach out to your professional growth committee. I know ours reimburses half of it upon completion. And it is eligible for college credit. I have never asked for that feature, but there is a way to do it and they can tell you how. So here are some upcoming dates in January, March, and April. So if this gets you excited about this topic, but you feel like you really want to understand it better, I highly recommend this 4-week course. Just Google Online Network of Educators and click on courses.
Okay.
Okay, so I have 3 main goals for this training. The first goal is that you'll be able to determine when documents can and should be used in an online course. Second, I want you to be able to create accessible Word, Google, PowerPoint, and PDF documents. And third, I want you to be able to determine the accessibility of the existing documents you already have. It's going to be a lot of ground to cover, so I'll do my best to move quickly, but also be clear. If you have questions, feel free to say something. You can also put it in the chat, but if I miss it, because I have 2 screens open right now, have someone just read it aloud so that I know there's a question. Okay, so if you were here last week, we talked a lot about content pages. We talked about how they're wonderful because they can be viewed on all kinds of devices, phones, iPads, computers. They adjust very easily. They don't require any kind of download. However, there are going to be times in your class where you might feel like a content page is not enough. Maybe you are trying to create a graphic organizer, or the way you're displaying things is just not easy to replicate on content. And that's when you're going to need to turn to documents. So when you're providing documents to students, you're going to need to apply the same principles of accessibility that you would use when creating content pages. So if you happen to be here last week, you heard some of these already. If you're brand new to this training, you'll be hearing some of these things for the first time. But like I said, I'll give you the presentation at the end, and I also recommend the class just for further review. So there's going to be three main types of electronic documents we're going to talk about in this training. The first one is word processing documents. So think Microsoft Word or creating something in Google Docs. We're going to talk about presentations. So think Microsoft PowerPoint, Google Slides. And then we're also going to talk about PDFs, which is just an acronym for portable document files. So word processing documents. In the past, this is how most of us made all of our handouts, and it was fine because we just printed them and we gave them to students, and that was sort of the most robust way to make sort of interesting, fun formats and really put in a lot of information. However, the world has changed. It's gotten much more technical and people have a lot more devices now. So a lot of the things that we used to put into Word as teachers, we now can actually put into a Canvas content page using the rich text editor, or it's sometimes called the rich content editor. So for me personally, I used to have a lot of Word documents, and I've had to be really intentional about changing over those to Canvas pages because Canvas pages are more accessible and usable for most students. However, if you have a compelling reason to make a document, you want to make sure that that document can be read electronically. So when it comes to creating a document, one of the things that's going to be a little bit challenging about just the process, but also our discussion today, is that there are lots of different types of software out there that do presentations, word processing, etc. Now, Apple does have Pages and Keynote. And while I like both of these software, you can only use them if you have a Mac. And a lot of our students do not have MacBooks or any kind of iOS-based laptop. So for that reason, I'm going to focus mostly on Microsoft products like Word and PowerPoint because those can be run off of a PC or a Mac. And I will also talk a little bit about things related to Google because I know some of you probably love Google Slides and Google Docs. One thing I want to say right off the bat, if you are a Mac user like me, you need to make sure when it comes to accessibility that you're using a version of Word or PowerPoint that is not before the 2016 version. You have to use the 2016 version or newer if there is newer. I guess I'm not positive there is, but there might be. But it has to be 2016 to the present. And the reason is that that software for Macs did not create accessible documents. So you could, well, it could create them, but it wouldn't export them as accessible. So you could make something completely accessible in an old version of Microsoft Word on a Mac, but then when you went to export it, it would not be accessible at all. So if you're a Mac user and you are passionate about making your work accessible, which we all should be because we're reaching vulnerable students and it's the law also, then you really need to upgrade to Microsoft Office for the Mac 2016. And there should be some kind of free download available to you as an LACCD faculty. So if you're not sure where that is, talk to someone in your IT department at your school. Okay, so when you're thinking about documents, you have to ask yourself, what is the best mode of delivery? Because if you're like me, my default is always, I have something to say to students, let me throw it into Word. And that's because for all of these years before technology got where it was, that is how I communicated with my students. I'd make something in Word and then I'd print it and I'd give it to them. But content pages in Canvas are much more accessible than documents and files. They just are. So before you take the time to make something an accessible document, slow down and ask yourself, can I transfer the content from this document to a content page? Because if there's not a good reason to keep it in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint, then you should really strongly consider changing it to a content page because it's just better and easier for students and it's more accessible. However, if there is a reasonable reason to provide the downloadable document to your students, that's when we need to start paying attention to how we're setting up that document. So a couple of drawbacks of using documents in case you've never thought about them. So in addition to being a little bit less accessible, or at least there's more accessibility issues, maybe I should say, downloading, archiving, and opening documents can reduce usability. So forcing students to download material can lead to a couple of negative issues. For instance, this is not so common in the age of COVID, but low-income students who are using a public or shared computer won't be able to store the document. Another thing might be a student who has trouble organizing themselves. They may have trouble archiving the document and finding it later. There's also going to be students without printers who are not going to be able to print out whatever it is that you gave to them. Oh, I'm sorry. And then finally, students using mobile devices may not be able to open all documents. So I don't know if you've ever tried to open a PDF or a Word document on your phone before. While it's technically doable, for me at least, there's a lot of zooming in, zooming out, scrolling left, scrolling right. And so all of those things can be drawbacks, which is why it is important to make sure that you don't want to convert to a content page instead. But if you've thought about all that and you think, I still need to present this as a document, here's how you're going to do it. Marie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. A lot of times I provide documents because I tell students they can use this for any class they take in the future. How long will they have access to the material I put into a Canvas class for them? Like, will my students have access to that material a year or two from now?
That's a good question. I do not think it's that long, but I'm not 100% sure. Mom, Dad, or Al, do you know, or someone else?
There is a setting that you can set. It says, and I think by default, the students will not have access to it immediately after the end of the semester. Now, if you go into your settings, you can extend it, but how long it extends, I don't know. It just, you can say allow students to access this past the semester. But the default is immediately after the end of the semester, they won't have access.
Thank you, Mom, Dad. And maybe one option for that, Marie, would be to put all of your most pertinent things into one giant Word document that they can download at the end and take with them. But it's up to you. You could also make each item individually accessible. So up to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So another thing you need to think about when you're making a document is what software will the student need? So sometimes we forget because it feels like everyone in the world has Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, that some students don't have that. And to meet the minimum requirements of the OEI rubric and also Section 508, we are actually supposed to include a list of all required software in our syllabus. Including things like you need Microsoft Word or you need a PDF reader. And we're also supposed to give links to where the students can purchase or download that software for free. So when possible, you want to provide your documents or files in formats that are more accessible using free or open source software, such as PDF, Google Docs, or OpenOffice. Or if you're going to use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, which I sometimes still do, just make sure that your students know that they either need that software, which they can actually get through LACCD, but they don't always know it. So make sure that they know how to get that software so that they can open what it is that you've put there. And Alex, thank you for putting in the chat how to change the setting of when the Canvas class closes. Okay, so creating an accessible document. A couple basic tips to keep in mind. And if you were here last week, these will probably seem a little familiar. The first thing is that you want to use styles to denote headings. So we talked about this a little bit last week, but when it comes to setting up something that a student's going to read, it needs to be as readable as possible. And that's not just for our students with disabilities. That's for all of our students, because we want them to read whatever we wrote and retain it. So part of doing that is going to be chunking and using white space. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but you want to use headings and you don't want to just bold them or underline them. You want to actually use styles to set up the headings, which I'll show you how to do that in a minute. We're going to need to use list styles to create numbered and bulleted lists. So you don't want to just type 1, 2, 3 or a couple of dashes. You actually want to use the list feature so that it comes across correctly to, for instance, a screen reader software, which a visually impaired student might be using to read your document. You also want to provide alternate text for all images, specifically images that are not decorative. So decorative images are a little bit different, but if it's a pedagogical image that is helping students learn, it needs alternative text for visually impaired students. You want to ensure when you do a table that the headers are tagged. Very simple reason for this is that some charts, well, tables, I should say, are read from top to bottom and some go from left to right. And a screen reader will need to know where to start reading in your table. You also want to ensure adequate color contrast between all text in the background. Again, for those with visual impairment, low vision, or another setting that makes it difficult for them to see. I mean, as I age, I find it harder too to read things that don't have enough contrast. So that's going to help everyone. And one final tip is to use tabs, not spaces, to move words. Okay. All right, I'm just looking in the chat. Oh, great. So Jesse said, currently the screen reader software JAWS is available to students at no cost from Freedom Scientific. That's great. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. And then Mitch, is there a Canvas link for the students to get the free MS Office software that we can add into the course via navigation pane in our settings? Does anyone have an answer to that? I'm not 100% sure.
If you log into the email, there is a link. So when they log into the webmail, same thing for faculty. There is a link on top that says download Microsoft Office. Right. So it's.
I often include a step-by-step process for students to do that. I put it in my syllabus as well as, you know, on one of the Canvas pages so they can see step-by-step how to do it.
Yes, thank you. And it is, for me, it's a little counterintuitive how it's sort of embedded in the email. So I think it is good to do a demo or have some steps. If you get stuck on that, reach out to your IT, or you can ask me and I can try to, I know how to find it in email. I'm not sure, to answer your question, if there's an exact Canvas link. That might need to be something your individual institution would set up. Okay. So similar to content pages, like we talked about last time, headings are going to help students retain information. Well, why is that? It's because the brain can only retain so much in short-term memory before it needs to dump it into long-term memory, to make it very simple, as I am not a scientist. But basically, headings and white space give our brain time to absorb what we've just read. It also allows students to skim. Now, I said this last time, some people may say, well, I don't want my students to skim my information. But good readers skim first and then they read, and that helps them retain. So you actually want your students to skim before they read so that they'll retain. So our brains are helped when we chunk information. And one of the things we talked about last week with readability is that we don't want to put in these giant paragraphs. I'm an English professor. I'm very long-winded. My factory setting is to write ridiculously long paragraphs. I've had to really work on that because my students need that information chunked. So we want to have more space, white space, and we want to have headings for the things that we do, not just bolded, but actual headings. So a couple of things to remember when you're trying to get the most from the headings for students is make sure your headings are logical and descriptive. So if they're too vague, they're not going to help someone who's skimming. There should only be one level 1 header, so one main header. Level 2 would be your main topic, and then level 3 would be subtopics. Make sure you use styles. Back in the day, before I sort of learned about accessibility, I used to make my headers just a bigger size font. But a screen reader isn't reading font size aloud to students. So it doesn't tell the screen reader that it's a heading. That's why we actually have to use styles. I also used to sometimes use underlining for a heading. Well, that was confusing too, because now when you see an underline, you think it's a hyperlink, especially with electronic documents. We don't want to confuse our students, and we want to make sure that they can follow. So make sure you're using styles, and then make sure you maintain the semantic structure of your headings, which is kind of a mouthful, but it just basically means don't skip from heading 2 to heading 4. You know, go in numerical order. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about how to do headings. What's a bit of a challenge for me, both in terms of the time restraint, is also one of the challenges, but the other challenge is that you're all using different things. So some of you are using Windows, some of you are using a Mac, and some of you are using Google. So I'm just going to briefly do an overview of each of these, and then I'm going to give you the PowerPoint so that you can go back more slowly and really, you know, kind of focus in on whichever type of device you're using. But if you're doing Word for Windows, so Microsoft Word on a PC, you're going to highlight whatever the text is that will be your heading, or place your cursor next to it. And then, you know, there's these options along the top, and you want to make sure you're in home. And then you're going to see something like this, and that's going to be styles. And now you can just click through, do heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and heading 4. Now, there is a way to sort of, you know, tweak them to exactly what you want instead of using the presets, but that's a little bit more complex than we have time for today. But that is something that you can do, and you can look up how to do that if you want. Otherwise, you can just click on the presets and you can use them. Now, if you're in a Mac, similarly, you're going to still be in the Home tab, but usually you'll see this little paintbrush next to an A that says Styles. When you click to open that, that's when all those styles that were on the previous page are going to appear. And again, if I had room to extend this out, you would see heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and heading 4 again. And you can also access styles from the format menu. Oops, sorry. Oh no, I skipped ahead. Sorry, 1 second. So yeah, if your window is small, sorry, you might see the styles, or it might already be popped out for you. And then if you're using Google Docs, you're going to highlight the text that will be your heading. And then from this menu bar, oh, sorry, I'm having issues with my slide advancing. Then you can go ahead and click from here, and you'll see heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and heading 4. So that's how you're going to basically do it on each of those settings. And again, like I said, I will give you the presentation so that you can review this more slowly, focusing on the exact type of device you're using. And then when you view this PowerPoint later, if you want to, I've added in additional resources you can click on to view more information. So everyone's kind of at different levels of tech savviness. So these will give you a really in-depth explanation if that's what you need. Next thing, formatting lists. So lists are a wonderful way to present information. They're very brain friendly. There's a lot of white space, and everything's organized and categorized. That's very helpful for our brains. So lists can be a great way to present related ideas, illustrate items in a group, present pieces of a series, or outline steps in a process. They use that white space, which appeals to the reader and to your brain. Just make sure that you're actually using list styles. So like I said, in the past, I used to put number 1, number 2, number 3, and ignore whether or not it was in a list style or something else. And sometimes I would use little dashes instead of an actual bullet. Well, that is not going to make the list accessible. So we need to use the built-in style features. So very briefly, in Windows, you can see here, you're going to see a little button. One looks like little dots for bullets. One looks like numbers. One last piece of advice I would give you is don't number something where the items, the order doesn't matter. If the order doesn't matter, use bullets because otherwise it's confusing. If it's something like a series of steps, then go ahead and use numbers. Okay, so you can highlight all the items, and then this appears in File, or you can also go to Format and choose List. Okay, Mac is very similar. So you're still going to see these little buttons in the middle for the bullets and the numbers. So just make sure you choose the right one. And then for Google Docs, you are going to make your list. And then after you highlight all the items in the list, you're going to go from Format to List. And then you're going to choose Numbered or Bullet. And as long as you're doing it through the actual official sort of stylistic way to do it, then a screen reader won't have any problem identifying that it's a list or a set of numbers. And I have a couple other resources that you can check out later. Hyperlinks. Hyperlinks are another thing that often can cause accessibility issues, but they're also a wonderful resource for us as teachers because they allow us to quickly link our students to resources. The issue is that if you have a screen reader and you're visually impaired, it's most likely that your assistive technology is going to create something like what I've put over here on the right, a links list. So what it does is it pulls out all the hyperlink language and puts it into one list so that a visually impaired student can easily navigate through those lists and visit them. The problem becomes when we don't label those hyperlinks properly. Think for a second if I had a document and every hyperlink was labeled click here or read more. When a student with a visual impairment uses their software to read my document, what they're going to hear is see more, click here, link here. Those are not descriptive links. And once they're pulled out of context, that student's going to have no idea what they lead to. So you want your hyperlinks to have a descriptive name that actually tells what it's about. So, you know, for instance, if you're looking over here, Carl Brown Scholarship or View the Memorial Service for Carl Brown is going to be a lot more useful than a link, which doesn't tell me anything, like the www dot, or something like click here or read here. So we talked a little bit about this last week, but when it comes to hyperlinks, the visual representation is almost always something that looks like a little chain link fence. Well, I guess maybe not a chain link fence, but looks like a chain link. So if you're trying to insert a hyperlink in Windows, you're going to find it under Insert, and you're going to see something like this. So it's like a world and then this little tiny blue link, right? And then you can actually put the address into this box. And so instead of, this is obviously just gibberish, but for my class as an English teacher, my name might be something like MLA Resources or MLA Style Guide. And then you click it and it goes to the link. And then for the Mac, it's going to be similar, insert, and then look for that little link. Again, you're going to put in the address. And then finally for Google Docs, it's also going to be insert link. So you're just going to go insert and then link and then put in the address. PAR, will it help to add the link to? So the only time you really need to do that, because what a student can do is they can right click and copy the link for themselves. So the only time you really need to put the link there is if you have an electronic document that you expect sighted students to print. And then if you expect a student to print it and not click, then sometimes it makes sense afterwards to put in the link. Is it correct that you can't put a link in the header or the footer? That is a good question. I don't think I've actually ever tried that. Has anyone tried putting a link in the header or footer?
I was told that the screen reader skips the header and footer, and so I keep getting an error, and I wondered if there was any way around that.
That is a good question. Anyone have any knowledge on that? I can try to look into that for you and get back to you. Will you put your email for me in the chat? Oh, I guess it's there. Sorry, I can see it in the chat. Okay, great. I'll try to look into that. Okay, and then I've put in some additional resources here for you to look at on your own time. So another important thing with documents is something called alt text, which stands for alternative text. Basically, if I'm a student who is visually impaired or blind, I am not going to see the images that you put into the document. So there has to be some way for me to get that value so that I'm being treated equally as all the other students. Now, this only matters if the image is pedagogical. So for instance, in this presentation, I have a lot of visuals that are purely decorative. They're just to engage a sighted viewer and make it more interesting. That is a little bit different. There's usually a check mark where you can say this is decorative, and then the screen reader knows doesn't have pedagogical value, it can just skip that. However, if you have a photo or a chart or a graph with pedagogical value, then you have to provide alternative text so that the screen reader can read that aloud to a student who is visually impaired. So adding alternative text is required under WCAG 2.0 Level A, as well as Section 508 standards, which I have also linked in this presentation.
Jennifer, if you have a complex graphic, there's a lot going on in it, and it conveys information. I know that you're not supposed to put a long explanation in the alt text. Can you say, see explanation on page 5?
Yes, and that's actually what they recommend, is that you would have sort of a little link underneath to a longer description. Because for instance, if you were in the sciences, and I sometimes think about, biology professors and how they have graphs of the human body, or charts, I guess I should say, and everything's labeled. That would be very difficult to do in 10 words or less, which is what we normally do for alternative text. So in the class that I attended, what they recommended is that you would have a little link to a much longer explanation. So yeah.
The link, does it go in the alt text and under the image, or just under the image and the alt text says complex diagram?
That's a good question. I think I would probably put something shorter in the alt text, like, let's say it's the chart of the human body. I think I would say chart of the human body, longer description on page 5 or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, and then Alex said hyperlinks will work on header, but I'm not sure if screen readers verbalize them. Okay. So if you're not dealing with a very complex image, which, we were just talking about, in general, you want your alternative text to be brief, 10 words or less, but also descriptive. If there is some kind of text on your image, that exact text needs to appear in the alternate text box. You also don't want to use the word image in front, because the screen reader is already going to say picture of or image of. So it's going to end up saying image of sunset, and it's going to be repetitive. So don't use image. If you need to identify the type of image, like photograph, painting, or screenshot, that's okay, but only if it's relevant. And then like we were just talking about, if the image is very detailed and it can't be summarized in a few sentences, so I think a lot about people in the sciences or maybe kinesiology, then you want to consider placing additional information about the image into the page text preceding or following the image. Or like we were just talking about, you could let the student know it might be at the end of the document or something like that. But it just needs to be very clear. Ideally, you want them to be close together, especially in a document. In a Canvas page, sometimes there will be a link to a longer explanation. Okay, so just to briefly show you how to put in alt text, if you are using Windows, you're going to choose Format Picture from the menu, and then you're going to select Layout and Properties. And then you are going to see something that says alt text. And you can also often right click. Yeah, I guess I should say right click. You see format picture, you come over here, and then there's a place for your description. It's going to be similar for a Mac. You're going to go to picture format again and format pane. And then down here, you can see this little arrow alt text. You just need to tap the arrow so it opens up. And then you're going to see this box over here, which is going to let you provide a description. And then for Google Docs, if any of you are using that, you're going to select your image, choose alt text from this formatting. So go to format again and then alt text, and then enter the appropriate alt text into the description. So not the title, and then hit OK. And then I've added a couple other resources to try to help you with alt text as well. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we talked about it briefly in the beginning, but we really want to make sure that we're careful with headings. Can everyone, by the way, can everyone still see my screen just to check?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So tables need to be formatted in such a way that a screen reader can tell what is the table header row. And like I was saying a few minutes ago, that's because you can read a table from left to right or from top to bottom. So a screen reader is going to struggle to know where to start reading. And if it reads in the wrong place, it's going to be very confusing. So you want to make sure that the header row is labeled, which I'll show you how to do in just a minute. Also, to keep your table as clear as possible, you want to avoid a table within a table. That's going to be really hard for the screen reader. You want to avoid splitting and merging cells. Again, that's going to be a struggle for the screen reader. And you don't want to have a lot of empty cells, because when the screen reader goes to read it, it's going to be very confusing for the student. So just to kind of show you how you would set up that header, if you're using Windows, you're going to select the header row. So for instance, in this table, it's this top one. Then you're going to right click and choose table properties. And then a little pop-up box will come up, and you'll select the row tab. And then you can just say repeat as header row at the top of each page. And the reason it's saying at the top of each page is in case your document, your table is more than one page long. But if it's not, it'll just highlight the top one. So this is what the table properties would look like. Allow row to break across pages, repeat as header row at the top of each page. And then that's going to make it so that you can, it'll be screen reader friendly. In a Mac, you're going to go to Insert Table. And once you set up the table, you know, you're going to create the number of boxes that you need. And then you just need to make sure that you have a header row assigned. And if you have more than one page, then you're going to need to make sure the header is repeated on the second page. And I know this is a little dense, so you will probably need to look back at it later. But basically, you would just go to table properties and then say allow, same sort of language as the PC version, allow row to break across pages, repeat as header row at the top of each page. Now, here's something important if you are someone who loves Google Docs, so or the Google Suite, I guess I could call it. Google Tables are not currently accessible because you can't actually designate or delineate a header row. So ask yourself if that table must be in a document and instead of in a content page, because you can definitely, like we talked about last week, if you were here, you can set up a header row in a Canvas page very easily. But if you have to have a table and it has to be in a document, then you really should use something like Word for Windows or Mac, because they're going to let you actually delineate the header row. And then these are a couple of resources that you can look at on your own time if you want to know more about how to do this. Okay, so retrofitting your documents. This is a hard one. It can be very time consuming. I speak from experience because I was someone who loved Microsoft Word, and I had all my documents that I gave out in class in Microsoft Word. So when I started learning about accessibility, I had a lot of work to do. I had a lot of retrofitting to do to make sure that those documents actually were accessible. So when you sort of make that decision of, I have this material and I need to retrofit it, remember, just like I said in the beginning, this is a really good time to ask yourself, does this really need to be a document, or would it be better as a Canvas page? If it's going to be better as a Canvas page, you might as well, if you're going to devote the time to retrofit it into a Canvas page. But if you think about it and you say, no, I need to retrofit this into a document, then there's a couple of things that you can do to make your document more accessible. So if you're retrofitting and the document is absolutely necessary, then the best place to start is with the built-in accessibility checkers. And luckily there's one for both the Word for Windows and the Word 2016 for the Mac, because remember, you can't do an older version of Word if you're a Mac user. And then I also recommend that beyond just using the accessibility checker, that you look over your document again. Because for me, I realized, like I said earlier, I'm really long-winded. I don't do a great job, or at least I didn't in the past, of chunking information for students. So it's a good idea to just look over it both with an eye for accessibility, but also for usability for all your students. So you want to look for thoughtful chunking to break up information into useful pieces. And if you don't have that yet, build it in. Descriptive headings and subheadings that follow a logical pattern, so a reader can skim and then read so that they really remember it. And smart use of lists, tables, and color. So like I was just saying, if you're a Mac user and you're about to retrofit something, it is vitally important that you use the 2016 version of Word. If you do not use it, all your time will be lost and in vain. So make sure, because that is the only version that's going to really work well for accessibility. So make sure you're using that most current version, or any version. I think that might be the latest version. I should check, but yeah. Okay, so if you're doing an accessibility check on Windows, you're going in Word, you're going to go to File and then Info, and then check for issues. And you're going to see this little pop-up menu. And as you might guess, looking at these options, you're going to click on Check Accessibility. And then this is going to run the accessibility checker and tell you all the concerns that the checker finds and how to fix them. So this can be very, very useful, much easier than it was before these things existed. That's for sure, for certain. If you are using a Mac, it's going to be under the Review tab. So it's a little pixelated because I blew it way up, but you click on Review, and then you'll see this little document with something that looks like a clock, and you're going to click Check Accessibility, and that's going to point out any accessibility errors to you. So the thing about Google Docs that is a little bit unfortunate is that there's no built-in accessibility checker. So if you want to do a check of a Google Doc that you made, you're going to have to install an add-on to do the checking for you. So what I recommend is something called Grackle Docs. So what you would have to install it, open your document, open the add-on menu. So I don't know if you can see it up here. Up here at the top, I have this picture where if you click on add-ons, you'll see Grackle Docs, and then you would choose Launch. And then this is going to pop up on the side, and it's going to tell you any issues that it's finding in your Google Docs. And Par, I see your question. We're actually going to get to that really quickly. Well, fairly quickly. So if you're wondering about PDFs, we'll get there very soon. Okay. And then I have some accessibility additional resources for how to use the accessibility checker. Okay. And we're almost done with sort of the Word documents, and we'll then be able to transition to presentations and then PDFs. But one thing that I would also just say is that in the past, I used to look for cool documents about writing and MLA, and I would just upload them to my shell without worrying or wondering if they were accessible. So it's one of those things that once you know better, you want to try to do better. So as you sort of work on this idea of universal design, designing for everyone, for the person with a disability, for the person who is fully sighted or has perfect hearing, everybody is who you want to design for. So when you find documents, you really need to curate them. You can't just assume that everything you find online is accessible. So what you want to do is open the document in your word processor of choice, whatever it is, with the most up-to-date software. Run the accessibility report to examine any issues. And then there's a couple different tools we talked about last week where you can check for color contrast. You can run those. Another thing I do is just sort of eyeball it sometimes if I'm you know rushing a little bit of whether the contrast between the background and the text seems strong enough. And George, thank you for sharing that link for PAR. And then also, just like I was mentioning earlier, you really, if you find something online, it's a good idea to do a manual check. So you're going to kind of want to look for those same elements we keep going back to: headers, properly formatted lists, meaningful links, alt text, formatted tables. Okay, so that's sort of getting through the first big chunk of what we need to talk about today, which was word process documents. So like Microsoft Word or Google Docs. But we also need to talk about accessible presentations. So for accessible presentations, you need to ask yourself first, what are you using the presentation for? So what I mean is, are you actually going to give your students the presentation to upload or download? Are you going to create a video that's captioned where you are just showing the presentation? So maybe you make a video of yourself talking through the presentation. Or are you going to convert your presentation file to PDF? So figuring that out in advance is going to kind of help you determine the correct path to make that item accessible. So a lot of us like to use PowerPoint or slides in our classes. I know that I do, and they can be very engaging and useful. If you are using a presentation in a video, or let's say in a Zoom class. So sometimes I'm in a Zoom class, I'm showing a presentation, and I don't actually give students that presentation to download. If I'm not giving them the presentation to download, it doesn't have to be accessible to PowerPoint. Now, if it was a video that was made in advance, it should still be captioned, right? The video itself. But if the students aren't getting the file, then they don't need that file to be accessible because they're not going to be going through that file with a screen reader. However, if you are going to provide them the presentation, and maybe you're going to do it over video and the presentation is a download, or you know, it's just that they can go in and click and put it on their computer, then you do need it to be accessible. So if you do decide to provide it, make sure that it's fully accessible, and then make sure you tell students how to find PowerPoint and download it for free through LA Mission College, or I guess I should say LACCD, since we have all different colleges here today. And then make sure that in your syllabus under required software that you include a link that will include where they can download PowerPoint to view it. You also can convert your, You can also convert your PowerPoint to PDFs, but if you do that, your PDF is going to have to be accessible. So a couple tips for accessible presentations. The first thing is to use the pre-designed themes. So if you've used PowerPoint before or Google Slides, there's all kinds of preset themes that they've created to make your life easier. What's great about these for accessibility is that they already have the correct formatting embedded. They already have formatted lists. They have images and text boxes and header and a reading order that's going to be clear. So these preset designs already have the sort of coding tag in the HTML that's going to let a screen reader understand the structure of the presentation. So that's going to make it a lot easier. And then you just need to sort of design your presentation with usability in mind. And you should be on your way to a fairly accessible PowerPoint or slide presentation. So it is okay to use text boxes, but like I said, you want to use a text box in a pre-designed theme because of the way it's set up. If you are adding a text box here and a text box there, and it's not part of whatever theme slide setup that you chose, it's going to interfere with the logical flow of the material. And suddenly PowerPoint and consequently the screen reader a student might be using is not going to know which text goes first, which text goes second, and so on. So if you find you need more text boxes, the best way to do it is to choose a slide layout from the template that has the text boxes you need and work from the existing layout. Marie, I see your question about Prezi presentations. I've heard that they are historically not quite as accessible, though I haven't explored it as much myself. Does anyone have any information on accessibility in Prezi?
What was the question?
Have you heard, Adrian, whether Prezi is, how Prezi is about accessibility?
No, I know at the time that it was new and everyone was using it, it was not friendly. So I would not recommend it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's what I had heard as well. It could be that they've updated it in the last, 2 months or something, but I would definitely, I love Prezi too, but I would definitely check into it if I'm going to retrofit or make something before I don't make new things in Prezi anymore for that reason. Doris, you said I require students to make a PowerPoint presentation as part of their coursework. Do we need to specify to them that they must use preset PowerPoint layouts? Well, I think doing that would make sure that whatever they present, I guess it depends if they're presenting, just presenting live to classmates, it might not matter. Kind of like if I'm just on video showing something behind me, a PowerPoint, the actual presentation doesn't have to be accessible. But if they're actually uploading their presentations for other students to download and click through, then I would say that it might be a good idea to use templates.
Sounds like it's pretty much, yes, I'm listening to you and appreciating your comment. Reading this just makes me worried because they do upload. These presentations are extremely important in their grades because of the high content that's in them. And then the presentation is used in two ways. One is that they're individually graded, which of course is just about me reading it. But the other is that the other students choose two different PowerPoints to actually evaluate, which means that they must have it loaded up into Canvas. And so I see now, and your language here is really clear, pre-designed themes. I have to say, it makes me cringe a little bit, not just because students, too many rules starts beating them down. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is an area where I want to emphasize creativity. I even add my own text boxes, and I see now I need to stop doing that, right? So I get it, and I thank you for this time.
Yeah, I mean, I I think it's the kind of thing where, yeah, it's hard because you want them to be creative. I mean, I use presets, but I still change a lot of things. So maybe you could encourage them to change it. Adrian or Adam, do you have any thoughts on students doing presentations for each other and whether they should use the preset themes?
That's a,
I'll let Adrian answer that one.
go ahead, Adam.
I said, go ahead. I'll let you handle that one.
I think that's a tricky one, and I do know that there are other two AT experts on this Zoom call. George and Jesse, do you want to comment on it, on anything like to this question?
Can I add something to it? This is Michelle Hernandez from West Los Angeles College. I'm a current student at Cal State LA right now, and I have to do presentations and I have to upload it on Canvas. I have to upload it in discussion so other people could see my presentations. I also have to videotape myself talking about my presentations at the same time, and they do need to be accessible. So in my cohort, we do have a couple of people who are visually impaired, and we also have someone who is deaf. So I do have to add captioning. I also have to do all the accessibility, the alt text, any added things too I have to do. And I've been doing it for about 2 years now doing that. And it's normal for me. I don't even have to think about it anymore. I did take a couple of, the instructors had a couple of training courses for us to do so we could learn how to do it, but now it's automatic for me. It's not a big deal. I check it as I go along. When I do my voicing, I make sure the captioning, I edit it. Like it's just part of the doing a presentation now. So at the beginning, I could see students possibly becoming frustrated, not knowing it, but once you get used to it, it's okay. It just becomes part of the norm.
Thank you, Michelle. That was a really helpful comment.
Go
ahead.
I was just going to, I guess, attempt to answer that question. So, as you mentioned, Dr. Crozer, it's all dependent on the software, but yes, typically everything has to be. We have to make all efforts to make everything compliant, and the technologies, as I mentioned before this presentation started, was that things have improved greatly, and that. I think it just requires practice, just getting to the steady habit of practice. But yes, depending on the software and technology that the user is utilizing to access, it's going to definitely make a difference in terms of how they engage with the accessible material. So there isn't, unfortunately, we're not at that state. I know all of us want to be there at some point where we could just utilize one system and make everything accessible and just use that. But unfortunately, we're not there yet.
Thank you, Jesse.
Oh, also, mind if I add something?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so the question of how screen readers read like PowerPoint stuff, it depends on the object. So like when you open a PowerPoint, right, there's like the heading title, and then there's like the body part. The header item is like that text box is number 1, and the body text box is item number 2. If you add like images, or if you make it like 2 text box slide, it'll be like the header is number 1, the left side is number 2, and the third is number 3. If you got pictures and stuff, screen readers will typically read things based off of objects within the specific slide. So if you add like 5 images, whichever, like if you have like a header and then the content and then a couple pictures, it'll be like heading, first item, body content, second item, then whatever the first image you added was, then the second image you added, then the third item you added. So screen readers read it in order of how things are how specific objects are put onto the slide, just as a really quick note.
Thank you, Alex. That's really helpful. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add on this topic? Okay, great. One thing that occurs to me, Doris, is that you could tell students, I think this is going to become a more and more marketable skill because a lot of people are having trouble converting their websites and files to a more accessible format and not just in academia. And so I think I could tell students, hey, this is a good skill for you to use. Then if you ever have to do, an accessible presentation in the future, you'll know how to. Maybe that would be a way to frame it positively, as well as, I guess, just sort of the empathy piece about helping a student who might have a disability.
Thank you.
Just some ideas. So yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Another important thing is to give every slide a unique title. And this is because students can use their screen reader, or they can, if they're sighted, they can look at each slide's title. And it's kind of like a header, right, where it just sort of tells them what's coming ahead. So your slide titles will be more helpful if they are unique and not repeating, and if they are descriptive. So in my first presentation, I had a little accessibility issue come up because the presentation was called "What is Accessibility?" And then I had another slide besides the title page that said "What is accessibility?" So I just renamed one of them for clarity. Similar to what we already talked about with Microsoft Word and Google Docs, if you have pictures, you want to include alt text. So the way that you can do that is to select the picture, and then in the format picture or picture format, depending on what version you're using, pops up, you will see something just like this that looks like, a picture of a mountain and a little text, and it's going to say alt text underneath. And then you can see this box on the right. How would you describe this object and its context to someone who's blind? Here's where you write your alternative text. Remember, just like we talked about, try to keep it short unless there is a pedagogical dense thing there that you really have to describe in a lot of detail. And then you can see there's a place to mark a picture as decorative. Like I said, in this presentation, a lot of my pictures are decorative. So I would, rather than giving alternate text for them, because they don't have a pedagogical purpose, I would just mark them as decorative. Okay, and also similar to Microsoft Word, all columns headers, or use column headers, sorry, for all tables. So you want to be sure any tables have a header row, and luckily PowerPoint tables tag header rows by default, but if you need to play with them more, you can see here that you could click header row, first column, banded rows. Okay, I am just looking over here at text. Mitch, to answer your question, there are a lot of course packs that are actually not accessible, and it's a problem. And for me, when I don't see my textbook people as much when we were all there in our offices in person. They used to sometimes walk by, but I would always tell them, look, one of the things that's most important to me is whether your teacher resources are accessible. And now before I adopt a new book, I ask the publisher, I say, are every single one of your presentations accessible? Because you can retrofit them, but it's time consuming. So yeah, you do unfortunately have to check, which is an extra step. In your presentations, if you have an embedded or linked video, make sure that it has a caption. And if you have an embedded or linked audio file, like to a podcast, make sure to include a transcript. Oh, okay, great. So Jesse said, in the assistive tech world, the term for bringing documents or making digital assets compliant to standards of accessibility is commonly referred to as accessibility remediation. Okay, great. That I need to start using that term. So you're kind of remediating. You're doing accessibility remediation. Great, thank you for letting me know that. And then I've added a couple of additional resources here for that. And then, of course, you're going to find old presentations that you need to retrofit. So it's going to be a little bit tedious at first, but I think it was it Melissa who told us, who spoke a little bit ago and talked about how it's hard at first and it gets automatic. I've had the same experience. It was really painful the first few times. Now it's becoming sort of second nature. Kind of like going to the gym the first time. After a while, you feel like you're going to die. Couple of days of going, you start to feel normal and like you can do it quickly. If your PowerPoint, if it feels really difficult to retrofit into an accessible PowerPoint, then you might want to think about converting what was in there to a Canvas page. So even with a presentation, you might want to ask yourself, would this be more valuable or easier to use as a Canvas page? Not everything will be, but it's worth asking if you're going to retrofit anyway. And then if you have old PowerPoint files, as probably many of us do, I know I do, you want to check the outline view to ensure the slide titles and reading order are correct. You want to check each image, graph, and chart to ensure alt text is included. You want to check bulleted and numbered lists to make sure those were actually formatted with a list tool. And then you want to run that accessibility checker that we were looking at a little bit earlier. Or I guess I haven't shown you where it is here. So in PowerPoint, you go to review, and then you're going to see the same sort of icon in the paper, something that kind of looks like a clock. Or maybe, I guess I'm not sure that's supposed to be a clock, but anyway, that image is what you're going to see. And then you will be able to do an accessibility check, and it will tell you what you need to fix. So one thing that I want to say for my Google users, there is no built-in checker for Google Slides. So if you love Google Slides, you are going to have to manually go through and check. You want to make sure each slide title is unique and descriptive. You want to make sure all the images, charts, and graphs have alt text. And you want to check lists to ensure that they were formatted with the list tool. Now, because Google Slides are technically web pages, you also can try using a screen reading tool such as Chromevox or NVDA, which I've linked in here if you want to look at them, to help you check your Google Slides. And kind of like what we were just talking about, just with like you had to curate documents, you also have to curate presentations. There's going to be a lot of great presentations out there. Not all of them are going to be accessible, including the ones from your publisher, which is frustrating. But you want to go through and do that same kind of check. Are there the right titles? Are there correctly formatted lists? Is there alt text for everything? Is there a logical reading order? And if those things aren't present, then you have to ask yourself, do I want to go through and take the time to make this accessible, or do I just want to find something else that's accessible already? And so you kind of have to make that choice as you curate presentations for your class. Okay. Doris, what was your question? What about copyright? Oh, about changing it?
Yes, you know, I understand that somehow with the screen reader phenomena, copyright can be set aside. But when I think about these courses and that everybody sees the same documents, I'm wondering about copyright here, where it says specifically do not, and this is even on government, some of the government website pages that I use, do not change the content. You are not allowed to alter or modify. Now, I'll send students sometimes just, you know, out of Canvas on a link, but other times I actually do use the document in its entirety in some way in the course. And I'm starting to, and it's not that I think that the federal or state government or, you know, are going to come and get me or something, but it is the idea of how muddy this becomes and not knowing and wanting to hear your take on this point.
That's a good question, but I might kick this up to the chain to people who know a little bit more than me. Adrian, what do you think?
I think the best thing to start with is to ask the creator of the PDF permission to do this. You need to have some kind of communication with the PDF creator who, if it's a website or if there's a content in that particular sense, to modify because you're a professor and you need to accommodate. Usually they will grant you that and to permit you because you're working with a DSPS student.
Okay, good advice. Thank you, Adrian. Okay, we have just a little bit of time left, but I wanted to get to Par's question and talk a little bit about accessible PDFs. So Converting your Word, Google Docs, and PowerPoints, your Google Slides to a PDF eliminates the software issue, right? Because a student can get Adobe Reader for completely free, which allows universal access to that material. But here's the caveat. Your PDF is only as accessible as the original document. So if you have the original file, there's a couple, if you find a file that you have the original of with an accessibility issue, there's kind of two routes you can take. The first is that you can go back into the original, like the original Microsoft Word document, and make sure that is 100% accessible. Once that's 100% accessible, I'll show you in a minute how you can export it to PDF and keep all those accessibility elements. So that's one option. Go back to the original, make sure it's 100% accessible, because if it's accessible, then it will make the PDF accessible, assuming you export it the correct way. The other thing you can do if you have a subscription to Adobe Acrobat Pro is that you can go in and fix the accessibility issues through that version of Adobe Acrobat. So just to show you how to do that. So let's say you make your PowerPoint or you make your Word document completely accessible. It passes the accessibility check, everything's there. Now you're ready to export as a PDF. Okay. If you're using Windows and your source file is 100% accessible, you're going to go to File and then Save As. Then you're going to choose Save as PDF, but make sure you do the last step. Under Options, you need to check the box for document structure tags for accessibility. So File, Save as, PDF, all of that's probably normal and familiar, but make sure you go under Options and you check the box that says document structure tags for accessibility. If you do that and you select OK, then you will have an accessible PDF.
Jennifer, I'm just throwing in my 2 cents. This is Michelle at West LA College.
Yeah.
I have to do this a lot for flyers, and it turns out it's consistently more reliable if I do file export. If I do file save, sometimes yes, sometimes no, particularly on the links, but file export, you know, much higher, much less problems.
Okay, good. That's a great tip. So yeah, try that too. File, export as, and then you still choose PDF. Do you have to still click this document structure tags when you do that?
I think that is built into the export as. That may be why it's been more trouble-free.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. That is helpful advice. Okay. If you're on a Mac, it's going to be pretty similar, but look a little bit different. So of course, remember, whatever Office item you're using, whether it's Word or PowerPoint, needs to be at least 2016, or it needs to be 2016, otherwise it won't export accessibly. So as long as you're using the 2016 version, you're going to go to Save As, File, File Format. Down here, you can see PDF. Now, here's the thing you have to remember: to click this top one, Best for Electronic Distribution and Accessibility. If you don't click this, it's not going to be accessible. If you choose Best for Printing, Microsoft thinks you're just going to print this out and give it to someone. It doesn't know that you're trying to use it online as an electronic document that needs to be accessible. So make sure you hit that top little button, I guess, check circle, and choose Best for Electronic Distribution and Accessibility. And then you can export. And then for Google, if you are using Google and you are converting to PDF, you're going to go to Download As from the File menu, File, Download As, and then you're going to pick PDF document. And when you do that, it should export accessibly. I have also put in some additional PDF resources for, I assume everyone here works at a community college, otherwise you probably wouldn't know about this training, but we have a lot of really great things available to us. So for instance, I don't know if you have played around yet with LinkedIn Learning, which we all have available for free as faculty of LACCD. There are tons of really cool things on there, but there's a lot of things about accessible design. So accessible PowerPoint design, accessible document design, all of them are free. I've had a really great experience trying out different things in LinkedIn Learning, so I would definitely check those out. There's quite a couple of different things here. Vision Resource Center is going to have more, and then your Learning Home. And then there's a couple of other things here as well that you can check out to help support you as you're making accessible PDFs. So once you've actually created a PDF, or let's say, you know, you create it and then you want to check it. So the best way to do this is Adobe Acrobat Pro. So if you are going to use PDFs a lot, you should probably use this software. @ONE definitely recommends that you do. Adobe Acrobat has a lot of tools, including an accessibility checker. So if you have Pro, you would go to the accessibility tool, select full report, and then click start checking. And then the accessibility report will open up on the left, and then you can follow the feedback to correct any errors. So you probably have some old PDFs. I know I do. And you may need to retrofit them. Now, of course, this depends on whether you have the original file. Sorry about that. Oh, hold on. If you have the original file, then you can ditch the inaccessible PDF and retrofit the original source file. Or maybe you realize that original file would have been better as a Canvas page. So you retrofit it for Canvas. You remediate it for a Canvas. And that's going to, if you want, you can go back to that original file, make it accessible, and then you can go ahead and convert the file back to a PDF. And Marie, yeah, I think so. I think at one point our IT office was giving that. So definitely look into that. I would recommend that. Seeing if you can get a free version. And yeah, Adrian says that's possible as well. So that's good to know. And if you don't have the original file, then you're going to need Adobe Acrobat Pro, which is a very good reason to have it for free from the district, because you're going to open the file in Adobe Acrobat, run accessibility check, and it's going to let you actually tell you step by step how to fix it to get through any of those issues and make it accessible. So if you don't have the original file, your only option is Adobe Acrobat Pro. So if you don't have that, or you don't know how to get it, maybe talk to your IT department, see if you can get that installed. And then similar to kind of everything we've been talking about, you have to still curate when you find PDFs online. Don't assume they're accessible, because they may not be. Even if it looks professional, doesn't mean it's accessible. So if you need to test the accessibility of an existing PDF that you like, that you find online, you can use Adobe Acrobat's accessibility checker, or a free one like Pack 2.0, which I've linked. Or you can try listening to it with JAWS or NVDA, which are screen reading software. Okay, so I know this was a whirlwind tour. We covered a lot, talked about a lot of different systems, steps. Hopefully you retained some of it, but hopefully you feel slightly more confident, if not 100% confident, on determining what documents can and should be used in an online course, creating accessible Word, Google, PowerPoint, and PDF documents, and determining the accessibility of existing documents. So, and I want to open it up to questions. By the way, if you are still here, if you could do me a huge favor and just write here in the chat, that's going to make it a lot easier for me with attendance. Then I think it's right around 4:29. So if you need to leave, I want it to open it up to people or let people know if you, once you write here, you're welcome to leave. But if you have questions, I am available to stay. I will try to answer them. If any of my other resident experts want to stay and help, that would be great too. And then don't forget that if you're interested in accessible videos, come back same time next week, same Zoom ID, 3 p.m. on Tuesdays. And big thank you for taking time out of a very busy, I'm sure, day, first day of December, and making this happen and taking time to think about how you can reach your students. So really appreciate that. And thank you. So do we have any questions?
Jennifer, I don't know how to use the raise hand thing right, so I hopefully I didn't step in front of anybody. I'm in the PR office. Often people will send me a flyer to post to the web that doesn't have to be up for a long time. And so I fudge on the accessibility, but I would like to have a solution for these little flyers that come in that get made in Canva or whatever. Do you find it acceptable that at the top of page 1, I put scroll to page 2 for accessible version, and then I put a link that takes you to page 2. On page 2 is just the straight text in Word formatted. On page 1 is a picture of the flyer, so it has an alt text image that says flyer for accessible version, see page 2.
Let me go ahead and ask somebody who might know better than me. What do you think, my DSPS friends?
I applaud that, because a lot of the times something is better than nothing. And I think if we have a student that is, honestly, I think that is the approach that we should take at this point in time, because without getting into the weeds about this, like I mentioned, there isn't a one size fits all for this information. So the fact that you are providing it, you're making it accessible, to me, I applaud that.
So Jesse, would the screen reader go, the first thing it would read is link to accessible flyer. The second thing it would read is alt text on the image, and then the person could go to page 2 or just link right away to page 2. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes.
Oh, you guys made my day. Thank you.
Also,
you're making it accessible.
also, just to let you know, if you click on participants, you'll see the hands raised. You'll see their hands raising, the checkbox.
Thank you.
The no, the yes. Okay, just so you know.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think to also add to what Jesse said, on a particular website, for instance, on your campus, you can provide 2 attachments links. One, for general students, right? One for accessible document. If you can show that, you've done your part. I think having separate and link it on your website will be doable.
It's difficult, when it's an event, you get the flyer on Monday and it's happening on Wednesday and you have 2 minutes, but I think I can always at least copy the text from the flyer
Right.
and put it on page 2, correctly formatted in Word.
Right.
So that's, I hoped it would be, you guys would say okay, and so thank you.
What other questions do we have?
I do want to post something. This is from the Accessibility Center from the State Chancellor's Office, and this is another link that can help you convert your documents. I'm not sure how complex it will be successful on a complex PDF, but it's someone that can extract to a particular format.
Yeah, I also noticed that whenever you convert something to HTML, if you can support it in HTML, it's very access friendly. So that was another thing that I was gonna recommend, Michelle, as a possible.
Yes, in HTML, I know it's a piece of cake. Unfortunately, there's just not the time on these one-off kind of events. But yeah, HTML is best, yes.
And I was hoping that the district would provide some sort of platform for that, for those types of messagings, because I know exactly what you're talking about, like those last minute sort of like hurry up and get it done kind of things.
Were there other questions?
When is your video deep dive?
Next Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Thank you.
Look forward to next week. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know if you have any. I mean, I know a lot of you are experts, so I appreciate you letting me do my best here. But, you know, if I'm ever missing anything, please feel free to chime in. Let me know. I want to just get better at this.
Oh no, I think I'm just glad that everyone's finally coming on board.
No, thank you very much. You're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's always helpful having a faculty, share with other faculty. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it lets people know that anyone can do it. I mean, even though we do know, but I don't know. I think hearing from another teaching faculty can be maybe helpful in realizing they can do it too.
Right.
Yeah, I think faculty are our strongest allies. I know I make that comment about